Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The Americans and Russians have met in Saudi Arabia. They have agreed to end the war in Ukraine. It could be the beginning of the biggest story of this year, a peace deal after almost 3 years of war. So what have they agreed to? And what happens next? Well, for one, Ukraine has rejected some of it. Zelensky was not at the talking table in Saudi Arabia, neither were the Europeans. They held their own separate meeting, and they couldn't agree to anything, it seems. Neither defense spending nor deploying peacekeepers in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Zelensky is looking for new financial supporters. He was in the UAE and then in Turkey. We'll tell you what's cooking there. Here in India, the Emir of Qatar is on a state visit. In Nepal, political reactions and anger over the death of a student in India. Is Tesla coming to India after all? They're hiring here. Sheikh Hasina says she will return to Dhaka. Will Argentina's President Milei be impeached over a crypto scam? And why Indian markets are falling. Also why fruit flies are going to space. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. The Arab League summit on Gaza is postponed to the 4th of March. It was initially scheduled for next week. The meeting has been called to discuss US President Donald Trump's Gaza proposal. Trump wants Washington to take over the Strip and move the more than 2 million Palestinians living there elsewhere. Sudanese paramilitary forces have killed more than 200 people in the last 3 days. The violence took place in the south of the country. For nearly 2 years, the Rapid Support Forces have been fighting with the Sudanese army. The conflict has killed thousands and displaced more than 12 million people. India's Supreme Court grants bail to British arms dealer Christian Michel. He is accused of bribing officials over a multi-million-dollar helicopter deal. Since December 2018, Michel has been in jail after he was extradited from Dubai. The court granted relief to the Augusta Westland chopper scam accused, citing delay in his trial. Vietnam takes a page out of Donald Trump's playbook, approves slashing billions of dollars from the government's budget. It will cut 1 in every 5 public sector jobs. The ministries of Transport, Planning, Communications and Labour have all been scrapped. And Pakistan beefs up security as it prepares to host the Champions Trophy, which begins tomorrow. This will be the first International Cricket Council event in Pakistan in nearly 3 decades. All matches will be played at home except for the ones involving India, which will be held in Dubai. They say geopolitics is boring. Well, certainly not on days like this. Today marked a key moment in history, the sort of moment you may play back in your mind years later. And it happened in Saudi Arabia, in the capital city of Riyadh. 2 delegations held talks at the Diriyah Palace. Let me pull up that picture for you. On the left is the US delegation, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. In the middle, you can see the hosts, Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister and Security Advisor. And on the right, the Russians, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and a presidential aide of Vladimir Putin. This image was unthinkable after 2022. Forget holding talks at the same table. Western officials would get up and leave when Lavrov started speaking. Yet here we are. The Americans and Russians talked for more than 4 hours. They also had a working lunch. Overall, the mood was serious and businesslike. No smiles, handshakes or hugs. And what about the outcomes? The United States has released a statement. It talks about 4 points of consensus. Number 1, establish a mechanism to address irritants in the relationship. Now, I'm not sure what irritant means here. Is it Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Or American sanctions on Russia? Or European refusal to talk peace? There is no clarity yet, but both sides are hoping to normalize relations, even appoint ambassadors to smooth things out. Number 2, both sides will appoint a team to discuss Ukraine. They will try to end the war as soon as possible. US officials said 2 issues would dominate those talks: territory concessions and security guarantees. Listen to this.
Well, there are some underlying principles. This needs to be a permanent end to the war and not a temporary end as we've seen in the past. We know just the practical reality is that there is going to be some discussion of territory and there's going to be discussion of security guarantees.
Number 3, the US and Russia will cooperate in post-war Ukraine. In fact, let me quote the statement. We agreed to lay the groundwork for future cooperation on matters of mutual geopolitical interest and historic economic and investment opportunities, which will emerge from a successful end to the conflict in Ukraine. Again, this is a broad statement. It could mean a lot of things. Will the US lift sanctions on Russia? Will Russia be allowed to invest again in Ukraine, or are they just talking about bilateral deals? These are unthinkable scenarios right now. Yet the statement hints at them. And finally, point number 4, both sides agreed to keep up engagements. They promised to move forward in a timely and productive manner. Those engagements could also involve a Putin-Trump meeting. Both sides agreed on the need for it. But a date is yet to be worked out, and those are the 4 points of consensus. Russia seems quite thrilled about it. They call the talks positive. They also praise the Trump team for ditching Joe Biden's position. As expected, there are no concrete measures. What we have is a statement of intent. America and Russia want to end the war in Ukraine. They also want to normalize their relationship. Frankly, this is as significant as any specific measure. The question is, what happens next? Well, concessions will have to be made. Russia is already prepared to make one. They have asked Ukraine to stop chasing NATO membership, but they are now okay with Kyiv joining the EU. Listen to this.
This is the sovereign right of any country. We are talking about integration and economic integration processes. And here, of course, no one can dictate anything to any country, and we are not going to do so. We do have completely different approach, though, to questions related to security and links to military and security alliances.
The US has already agreed to the NATO bit. They have shut the door on Ukraine's membership, and today's meeting suggests more concessions could be lined up, perhaps on sanctions and territory. The US says sanctions will have to be lifted once a deal is struck. And all of this will worry Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky is also in West Asia today, but he was not invited to the talks. He has made one thing clear, though. He will not accept any deal made behind his back.
Ukraine will not take part in the talks in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine did not know anything about them. Ukraine regards any negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine as ones that have no result. And we cannot recognize anything, any agreements about us made without us, and will not recognize such agreements.
Well, there is no deal yet, but the trajectory will worry Zelensky. He was slated to visit Saudi Arabia this week, but after these talks, he has postponed that trip. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio tried to address these concerns. He said Europe and Ukraine would be at the table.
It's a high-level team, including those who are experts on these topics, the technical side, to begin to engage with their side on parameters of what an end to this conflict would look like. And on that front, obviously, there's going to be engagement and consultation with Ukraine, with our partners in Europe and others. But ultimately, the Russian side will be indispensable to this effort.
Well, at the table will not satisfy Kyiv or Europe for that matter, because it could mean a lot of things again. For example, will Ukraine be involved in the formulation of the peace plan? Will they be consulted at every stage? Will their inputs be included? Or will they be given a deal to sign right at the end? That part is not clear yet. Also, Trump is driving a hard bargain. He knows that Zelensky wants security guarantees from the US, so he's putting a big price on it. Donald Trump wants a 50% cut, not just on Ukraine's rare earth minerals, but on all minerals. The US also wants access to ports, energy, and infrastructure. Zelensky has already rejected this deal, but going forward, he may not really have an option. The Riyadh reset has boxed him into a corner. His last hope is Europe. So the US and Russia are negotiating a ceasefire. Ukraine has been left out in the cold, and Europe has been snubbed. They weren't even invited to the talks, like I told you. In response, Europe decided to huddle. Their leaders met up in Paris for an emergency mini summit. The location was the Elysee Palace. The host was French President Emmanuel Macron, and in attendance were the top leaders of Europe, including NATO chief Mark Rutte, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and EU Council President Antonio Costa. This is Europe trying to regroup and devise their own strategy for the war. But were they successful? The meeting lasted for around 3 hours. It had two main outcomes. First, increased defense spending. That's what they discussed. It's something that all leaders agreed on.
On defence, it's clear the US is not going to leave NATO. But we Europeans will have to do more. The issue of burden sharing is not new, but it is now pressing. And Europeans will have to step up, both in terms of spending and the capabilities that we provide.
For decades, Europe has leaned on the United States, especially as its security guarantor. During the first Trump administration, this issue came up. Trump wanted Europe to spend more on defense. If not, he said he'd withdraw from NATO. That sent European capitals into crisis mode. They increased defense spending to 2% of their GDP. That's what NATO members are required to do, spend 2% of their GDP on defense. Now, most of them have started doing it, but they did it only after Trump's threats in the last term. And all of them still don't do it yet. Plus, even at 2%, Europe's armies are still underfunded, so they now are talking about raising it to 3%. And that's being met with fierce resistance. These governments are struggling with fiscal constraints, and defense is not their biggest priority.
Ich bin sogar ein wenig irritiert.
We are all already committed to spending 2% of our economic output on defense in the long term. A few member states are not quite there yet, but they're on the way. However, it will be very important for the future of Europe that we enable everyone to do what is necessary for them.
Das ist höchst unangemessen, es ganz offen und ehrlich zu sagen.
So that was the first outcome. Europe is divided over defense spending. The second outcome involves sending peacekeepers to Ukraine. The suggestion initially came from Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK. He said that he was willing to put boots on ground to send peacekeepers to Ukraine. But he would do it on one condition. Listen to this.
Europe must play its role. And I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
So Starmer says he'll do it, but only if there's a lasting peace deal. And he wants a US guarantee. Will Trump agree? We don't know. And now it doesn't even matter because Starmer's plan was killed in his own backyard. European leaders have rejected it. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz called the idea, and I'm quoting, premature. French President Macron was non-committal. Poland did not want to be part of it, and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni questioned the plan. There are many problems with the peacekeeping force. It pits Europe in a direct conflict with the Russians, and it stretches the underfunded European armies, so the plan may not fly. And this meeting has basically proved only one thing, that Europe is divided. It can't seem to agree on anything. The war in Ukraine broke out in 2022, right on Europe's doorstep. It threatened their peace and security. A weakened Ukraine was bad news for them. Yet for 3 years, Europe took a backseat and followed America's lead. But now America has a new president and a new plan, and Europe has no place in that plan. They find themselves on the sidelines, desperately hoping for a seat at the table.
It is a painful circumstance that we Europeans will have to try to find out about it from the newspapers because we missed the moment. The leaders of the big countries of Europe missed the moment when they could have made initiatives in the matter of the Russia-Ukraine war.
So what's next for Europe? The illusion of permanent American protection is cracking. The transatlantic alliance is under strain. Europe has been thrust into a moment of decision, a moment that it has long postponed. So it must do something now. Macron, Starmer, Scholz and others may disagree on the plan of action, but I'm sure they agree on one thing, that the stakes are high. This is about their security, their own security. Without a coherent strategy, Europe may become a bystander in its own story. It's a continent at a crossroads. It can either act now and define its future or squabble and be defined by others. So Europe is a divided house. Ukraine's president tried to rally Brussels, but he knows this. Without America's security umbrella, Europe itself is vulnerable, and the US under Donald Trump is folding up that umbrella. It wants allies to pay for support, and it is asking for a hefty price, a price which Zelensky has refused to pay. So this is how things stand. American support is waning, and Europe is weakened. Then who can Zelensky turn to? The Ukrainian president is looking for new allies. On Monday, he was in Abu Dhabi. He met with the president of the UAE, and this is what he asked for.
I would like UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan to try and increase the number of prisoner exchanges and prisoners to be released. We talked about it, and he said that he and his team will work on it.
Why the UAE, you may ask? Because the UAE has been a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. It has negotiated multiple prisoner swaps. Now, Zelensky wants something else. He wants economic support. He wants investments from the kingdom. And he did manage to sign some deals this time. One of them improves Ukraine's market access to the UAE. They're also working on a new investment council. Kyiv wants to attract investment from the UAE, and this council will facilitate that. And Zelensky's team has been playing it up. They're highlighting the strides they have made in areas like trade, investment, and economic support. And this effort is not limited to the Emirates. Zelensky has cast a wide net. He is looking for new funding, new partners who will invest in Ukraine's future, and more importantly, new financiers who will help rebuild Ukraine. Which brings us to Turkey. Zelensky arrived in Ankara today. He wants Turkey to have a quote-unquote more active role in rebuilding Ukraine. They also discussed proposals to expand bilateral trade. Zelensky inaugurated a new Ukrainian embassy in Turkey, and a few hours ago, he met with President Erdogan.
Considering the active diplomacy we have pursued in the last 3 years, our country will be an ideal host for the talks that will likely be held between Russia, Ukraine, and America in the coming period. In my meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, I expressed Turkey's strong support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence. At the same time, I emphasized that we will provide all kinds of support to conclude the negotiation process with a lasting peace.
Just like the UAE, Turkey too has played mediator in this war, and now Kyiv wants more. It wants military support. Zelensky wants Erdogan to join the US and Europe and to offer security guarantees against Moscow. I know what you're thinking. This is one far-fetched idea. Zelensky wants ironclad security guarantees, the kind which NATO members have. And this idea has always been a non-starter. Even Joe Biden rejected it. Now with Trump in office, it's even more unlikely. And without support from the US and Europe, Zelensky will struggle to persuade Turkey. The past few weeks have only amplified his challenges. The flow of military aid has slowed. The US does not want to underwrite Ukraine's war, and Europe cannot replace US support. They are trying to raise more money, though. They're discussing a new initiative to send more military aid to Ukraine, to buy ammunition and air defense systems. The military equipment that Ukraine needs urgently to defend itself. But it's not clear how much money Ukraine will get. No figures have been mentioned, possibly to avoid over-promising and then under-delivering. As of today, Zelensky is short of both money and weapons. These are two things which are critical to win any war. His commanders are anxious. The front lines have relatively stabilized, but without any substantial aid, Ukraine will struggle to defend itself. Zelensky only has bad options right now. And the best of the bad options is to strike a deal and do it quickly. To India now, which is hosting the Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. He's on a 2-day state visit. His first state visit to India in almost a decade. It began with a special gesture. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi personally welcomed Al Thani at the airport. Since then, the two leaders have held talks covering issues like trade, energy, and people-to-people ties. India and Qatar are set to elevate their relationship to a strategic partnership. The countries want to double bilateral trade by 2030, and Qatar has announced a $10 billion investment in India. Some big announcements there. But how significant is this visit? How have India-Qatar ties evolved over the years, and what does the future hold? Our next report breaks it down for you.
On Monday, Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani landed in New Delhi, and he had someone special waiting at the airport, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Breaking protocol, PM Modi received the Qatar Emir at the airport, welcoming him for his 2-day visit to the country, a quote-unquote special gesture for a special friend. This is Al Thani's second state visit to India. The first one was in 2015, and it comes just over a year after PM Modi visited Qatar. On Tuesday, the Emir got a ceremonial welcome at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. This was followed by his meeting with PM Modi at the Hyderabad House. It focused on trade, investment, energy, technology, as well as people-to-people ties. Both sides agreed to elevate their relationship to a strategic partnership. Both leaders spoke about increasing investments in India, especially in smart cities, food parks, startups, and artificial intelligence. They also announced agreements that aim to tackle double taxation and prevent fiscal evasion of income. Qatar and India have had a long and interesting relationship. Doha's trade with India is $20 billion. Some 840,000 Indians live and work there, which is about 27% of Qatar's population. But the foundation of this relationship is energy. Qatar is the largest supplier of LNG and LPG to India. It makes up 48% of India's LNG imports and 29% of the LPG imports. In 2024, both sides renewed an energy deal. Qatar will supply LNG to India for 20 years. The deliveries will begin by 2028. It's a massive energy deal worth $78 billion. So there's a lot to like about Qatar. It's a reliable supplier of energy. It is home to thousands of Indians. It's also a solid investor in multiple industries. Last year, Doha gave India some good news. It freed 8 ex-Indian Navy officers. All of them were on death row last year. So the relationship is looking strong. But there are some not-so-good parts as well. Qatar has a history of supporting terrorists. Hamas's political leadership used to live there. So did the Taliban leaders. Plus, many reports link Qatar to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Doha also uses its media network Al Jazeera for soft power. So Qatar isn't a straight shooter, but India has widely looked beyond that. In 2017, Qatar was under blockade from other Arab Gulf states. They accused Doha of supporting terrorism. That siege led to a food crisis in Qatar. New Delhi came to Doha's rescue by opening a direct trade route to Qatar. It has also been helping Doha improve local agriculture. So this has been a relationship India has long cultivated. Sizable trade, solid investments, a large diaspora and personal outreach. That's what has made the India-Qatar relationship what it is today.
Is Tesla coming to India? Don't worry, it's not a déjà vu. We're actually asking this question again because the company is making moves. Tesla has posted a jobs listing on LinkedIn. They're hiring for 14 positions. Some are customer-facing like store manager and Tesla advisor. Others are back-end jobs like technicians and analysts. This hiring spree has triggered the obvious question, is Tesla coming to India? Well, the timing does add up. Last week, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in the US. He met Tesla owner Elon Musk there. And days later, they have posted this jobs listing. So like I said, the timing does make sense. Reports say they are considering showrooms in 2 locations, New Delhi and Mumbai. And this raises a couple of questions. Why is Tesla coming to India now? What has changed in the last few years? And will it shake up India's EV landscape? The first answer is obvious. Tesla is coming to India because India is a lucrative market. India's EV sales grew around 20% in 2024. 20% growth last year. Indians bought almost 100,000 electric cars. That's up from 82,000 in 2023. The government has also set an ambitious target here. This is what India wants, the government of India wants by 2030. 30% of all private cars should be EVs. 70% for commercial vehicles and 80% for 2- and 3-wheelers. They should all be electric by 2030. So India is a prize for any EV seller, maybe not now, but certainly in the future. Which brings us to the second question. We've been hearing about Tesla's entry since the pandemic. What is taking them so long? Well, the government of India was asking Tesla to set up a factory here, basically to make their cars in India. But Elon Musk was not willing. He wanted to import Tesla cars into India first, see how the response was, and then commit to factories. Just one problem though. Imported luxury EVs were taxed steeply in India by almost 110%. Musk lobbied the Indian government to slash these rates, but no luck. New Delhi would not budge. The tax remained 110%. But then came Donald Trump, and India relaxed some of the tariffs to appease the new president. Luxury EV tariffs were cut from 110% to 70%, 70. So the market is now more lucrative. And what about the factories? There is no word yet on local production. Last year, Tesla was keen on setting up a factory, but those plans were put on hold. Since then, Elon Musk has latched on to Donald Trump, and Trump is asking US firms to make in America. Frankly, it's a bit of a pickle for him, because China is a major market. Last year, around 11 million EVs were sold in China. Imagine that, 11 million compared to India's 100,000. So Elon Musk has a choice to make here. Does he move production out of China? And if he does, will he shift it back home to America, or will he friend-shore it to India? That's the question to watch out for. In the past, Musk has been very friendly with China. You'll see him meddle in Europe or in Britain, but you will never see him meddle in China's matters, no word. In fact, he has supported China's claims on Taiwan. We saw that warmth last year. In April last year, Musk was slated to visit India on an official trip, but at the last minute he cancelled it. Apparently, he was swamped with too much work. Yet a week later, he travelled all the way to China. So Elon Musk's priorities are quite clear. China first, everyone else second. Don't expect that to change anytime soon. Experts say Tesla will most likely import cars first. They will see the local response and only then invest in local production, which was their plan all along, which is what he wanted. The question is, how will it impact India's EV landscape? Well, it's a lot more mature than before. Indian car makers are betting on EVs. Mahindra unveiled 2 electric vehicles recently. They have racked up 30,000 bookings. That's almost 1/3 of India's total EV sales from last year. Tata also has a lineup of EVs. They make up 38% of the market. So it's not like EVs are a wonder in India. Plus, the price is going to be an issue. Tesla cars cost upwards of 50 lakh rupees. That's a very small share of car sales in India. It gets even smaller if you count just EVs. Of course, the brand has a certain appeal to it, but we'll have to wait and see if that works in India. On Saturday, a 20-year-old Nepalese student died by suicide in Odisha's Kalinga Institute of Technology, better known as KIIT. The police have since arrested a male student believed to be linked to her death, but tension has gripped the KIIT campus. Nearly 500 Nepalese students staged a protest. The matter escalated. The students were evicted from the campus, and the issue turned into a diplomatic nightmare. Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli has spoken up. The Nepal embassy in India has stepped in. The university has since issued an apology. But will that be enough to calm things down, or will this case put pressure on India-Nepal ties? Our next report tells you.
On February 16th, a tragic incident shook the Kalinga Institute of Technology in Bhubaneswar, Odisha. A 20-year-old female student was found dead in her hostel room. She had died by suicide. The exact reason remains unclear. But soon after, social media exploded with allegations. Many posts claimed she had been harassed by her former boyfriend. Authorities acted swiftly. On February 17th, the accused male student was arrested and sent to judicial custody. The investigation is still ongoing.
उसके बारे में तो यहाँ का प्रशासन लोग इन्वेस्टिगेशन कर रहे हैं या अभी पोस्टमार्टम का रिपोर्ट भी आएगा तो उसके बाद नहीं बस इतना हम लोग को इतना तक इन्फॉर्मेशन है कि नहीं हरासमेंट और इमोशनल ब्लैकमेलिंग
But the case sparked outrage across campus. At least 500 Nepalese students at the university started protesting, claiming that the authorities failed to take any action. They also alleged foul play in the suicide. Once the protests grew big, the university cracked down by evicting the students. KIIT asked all Nepalese students to leave the campus immediately. Many allege they were forced out of their hostels.
लड़की सुसाइड की थी उसके लिए हम लोग प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे थे और प्रोटेस्ट को मतलब ना हो प्रोटेस्ट दबाने के लिए अब दबाने के लिए उनको लोग क्या मन सकते थे हमको नहीं पता पर हमको जबरदस्ती निकाला गया हॉस्टल से और हॉस्टल से निकाला गया। अभी ट्रेन भी फिक्स नहीं है, ट्रेन कब आएगी कब जाएगी, हमारे पास पैसा भी नहीं है, रात से हम भूखे भी है, अभी तक खाना भी नहीं गया। हम लोग अभी पूरा बेस आ रहा है, हमको अभी हेल्प चाहिए, हेल्प की जरूरत है।
The expulsion caught the attention of Kathmandu and Nepal Prime Minister Palki Sharma Oli. Its embassy in New Delhi dispatched 2 officers. It was to counsel students who were asked to leave the campus. The embassy also assured that it was in touch with KIIT and the state government. It also urged the institution to ensure the safety of Nepalese students. It was after this intervention that the university did a complete U-turn. It appealed to Nepalese students to return to the university. It also asked them to resume academic activities. The state government also waded into the issue. Authorities set up a 24-hour helpline. This was for students facing similar security issues. The Odisha police also filed cases against several university personnel. It was for the manhandling of the students. KIIT has also suspended 3 staffers for provocative comments. But despite this course correction, the damage had already been done, especially to India-Nepal relations. Today, members of the students' wing of the Nepali Congress Party staged a protest in Kathmandu demanding justice for the Nepalese student. Nepal is the largest source of foreign students in India. In 2022 alone, over 13,000 Nepalese students were enrolled in Indian universities. While the university now attempts damage control, the question remains, will this controversy leave a lasting impact on educational ties between the two nations?
When a leader gets toppled, they have 2 options. Either sail into the sunset or keep fighting. We thought Sheikh Hasina was going to pick the first option, but turns out she's picked the second. Sheikh Hasina wants to keep fighting. She virtually addressed a party event this week. She promised to return to Bangladesh, even claiming that that is why God kept her alive. Listen to this.
এবং যখন আমি দেশে ফিরতে পারবো ইনশাআল্লাহ প্রত্যেকটা পরিবারের যা যা লাগে সব সহায়তা আমি দেব আর হত্যাকারীদের বিচারও করব বোধহয় ওই জন্যই বোধহয় আল্লাহ বাঁচিয়ে রেখেছে আমাকে সেটাই আমি মনে করি কাজেই আমি এটুকু তাদেরকে কথা দিতে পারি যে এই ধরনের অপরাধে যারা জড়িত ষড়যন্ত্রের সাথে জড়িত এবং এখন পর্যন্ত দেশকে যারা জঙ্গির দেশে পরিণত করে একের পর এক মানবাধিকার লঙ্ঘন করে যাচ্ছে তাদের বিচার বাংলা মাটিতে হবে।
Really tough words from Sheikh Hasina. She's calling the Yunus regime a government of terrorists. She's also promising to avenge her supporters. This is not a conciliatory tone. This is defiant and aggressive, which raises a couple of questions. One, what is Hasina hoping to achieve here? And second, how will India see it? And the third question, how will Mohammad Yunus react? Well, Hasina is still in India. She's said to be living somewhere in New Delhi, that too under India's protection, under state protection. But Bangladesh wants her back. Sheikh Hasina faces dozens of criminal charges in Bangladesh. They have officially asked India to send her back. Though clearly India is in no mood to do so, which makes you wonder, does Hasina have India's blessings in this crusade, or is she going rogue? It's hard to imagine Hasina doing this without India's permission. After all, she is on Indian soil. Plus, you can understand New Delhi's grudge. India has asked Dhaka to move on, to turn a new chapter in this relationship, but Dhaka is hung up on Hasina. They want her back, even if it means a standoff with India. So perhaps India is responding in kind. As for her return, it seems impossible right now. This is not the Bangladesh of Sheikh Mujib and Sheikh Hasina. This is a radical, violent Bangladesh. The new regime is erasing Hasina's legacy. Even textbooks have been revised. The new books have removed Sheikh Mujib's speeches and poems. Instead, they praise the so-called August Revolution. That's what they're calling it. August Revolution, the protests that toppled Sheikh Hasina. On the streets, radical parties hold sway. They have been targeting minorities and Hasina supporters. So returning to Dhaka is a non-starter right now. If anything, it's more dangerous than last year. Which brings us to Mohammad Yunus. On paper, he still rules Bangladesh, though he seems to have no control over the country. Most reports mention two camps in Dhaka. The first is the Jamaat, a radical Islamist group that was banned by Hasina. Mohammad Yunus has successfully revived them, the Jamaatis. And the second group is the students. The students also have radical leanings. What they lack is organization. Though maybe not for long, because reports say the students will unveil a new party next week on the 24th of February. They say it will be a centrist party, one that draws from last year's protest movement. Their goal is to take part in the next election. And when is that? Possibly late 2025, later this year, or early 2026. That's what Yunus has promised. Until then, he needs to manage his domestic and foreign affairs, especially his ties with India. Over the weekend, we saw some engagement. India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar met Bangladesh's interim foreign minister. He said ties have improved in the last 6 months. He also promised that Bangladesh would never threaten India's security. I know this sounds good on paper, but actions on the ground do not match these words. Bangladesh has opposed India's constructions at the border. They have talked about cancelling existing treaties. Plus, they're hosting Pakistani spies and cozying up to Islamabad. How does this count as improving ties? The fact is, there is a big trust deficit. The Yunus regime sees India as a proxy for Hasina, as an ally who propped her up. As long as that does not change, this relationship will remain tense. As for Sheikh Hasina, she is good leverage to have right now. But the key is to strike a balance between hosting an old friend and making new ones. Now let's turn our attention to Argentina, where President Javier Milei is facing impeachment calls. This is thanks to what's being called Cryptogate. Here's what happened last week. President Milei endorsed a cryptocurrency on social media, a crypto coin called $Libra. It's a little-known token, but Milei endorsed it. And after his promotion, it shot up in value. Hours later, it crashed because Milei deleted his post. So now he is being accused of fraud. He faces legal action and calls for impeachment. What does this mean for Argentina and Milei, especially ahead of the midterm elections later this year? Our next report tells you.
Cryptogate. This is what Argentina's latest political firestorm is being called. This happened after their president Javier Milei endorsed an unknown cryptocurrency token, which shot up in value after his promotion and then swiftly cratered. Now the ultra-liberal president is facing impeachment calls and legal action accusing him of fraud. So here's what happened. The saga began last Friday. Milei posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, about the Libra token. He said it would stimulate the economy and fund small businesses and startups. He shared a link to buy the crypto. This sudden attention gave the token a boost. It immediately soared in value, from nearly zero at the time of its launch to about $5. But these huge gains were erased just as quickly. Fear spread that the coin was a scam. After all, Libra is a little-known cryptocurrency. It's not conventional like Bitcoin or Ethereum, with strong security mechanisms or decentralized networks. So there are no technical details on how it works, or on its mechanisms for distributing funds. So only a few hours after endorsing the token, Milei deleted his post and the cryptocurrency nosedived in value. It plummeted to under $1 and people lost millions of dollars over a matter of hours. So Milei took to X again, saying, "I was not familiar with the details of the project." But the scandal nonetheless sparked chaos in the country. So on Saturday night, the president opened an investigation into the matter. And on Monday, he compared the incident to a slap in the face.
Those who participated in that, they did so voluntarily. Is it correct for a president to promote this? I didn't promote this, I shared it. Do you acknowledge you made a mistake? Ex ante, I didn't. Now, it's true. In wanting to help those Argentines, I was slapped in the face. But did the state lose anything? Nothing.
The lukewarm response has done little to quell tensions. Argentina's fintech chamber says this could be a case of rug pulling, of pump and dump. Rug pull is a scam which sees crypto rapidly inflated or pumped before crashing, while insiders dump their stake, making the tokens worthless. This is a fraud, and that's what Milei is being accused of. It comes about a month after US President Donald Trump launched the Trump meme coin, which surged before crashing, and a few years after Milei promoted the CoinX platform. In 2021, when he was a national deputy, this offered major profits, but it's now being investigated for alleged fraud. After the latest scandal, opposition leaders say they plan to impeach Milei. Lawyers have filed complaints of fraud in Argentina's criminal court. Analysts call this the biggest crisis for Milei's administration since he took office in December 2023. And it comes at a crucial time, just ahead of midterm elections later this year.
Let's move forward with the impeachment. Aren't you scared of being taken out? No.
Milei is seen as a custodian of economic recovery, the president who champions market deregulation. He calls himself a techno-optimist who has helped crypto explode in the country. So Milei may see this crypto crisis as a temporary slap in the face, with no fears of being taken out. But if he's not careful, this scandal may snowball just enough to sap his political momentum and hand his opposition a lifeline ahead of the midterm elections.
It's not just cryptocurrencies. Indian markets are also facing turbulence. 2025 has started on a sour note for investors here. More than $50 billion has been wiped out this year. And we are only in the month of February, so $50 billion gone in less than 2 months. Even today's trading session ended in the red. Clearly, we are in a bear market. What is not clear is if they have bottomed out yet. Just last year, Indian markets had the global spotlight. There was an unprecedented bull run. India was among the best performing markets globally. It delivered superior returns and outperformed many developed economies. So what has changed now? What has disrupted this bull run? In 2 words, Donald Trump. It is the Trump effect at play. Foreign investors are offloading their Indian holdings. This year, they have sold shares worth over $10 billion. You could say these investors have made an exit. India's finance minister says they're booking their profits.
FIIs also go out when they're able to, in a position to book profits. Indian market today, Indian economy today, has an environment in which investments are also yielding good returns and profit booking is also happening.
There is some merit to this argument. Last year, Indian markets were valued at over $5 trillion. Over $800 billion was added in 2024 alone. So the investors who entered the Indian market before the bull run stand to make a handsome profit. And it makes sense to sell at the right time. But this is only a part of the story. There are other factors at play as well. After Donald Trump's win, US government bonds have become more attractive. They are available at better interest rates, so some investors are choosing to park their money in US treasuries. Others are spooked by Trump's unpredictability. They're worried about his tariff threats. Last week, Prime Minister Modi met the US president. It was a positive meeting with many promising takeaways. The US and India are discussing a trade deal, but Trump has not backed down from his threats. Before meeting Prime Minister Modi, Trump slapped reciprocal tariffs on every trading partner. He raised taxes on several imports. He also threatened BRICS nations.
And I said, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every one of those nations. And at the mere thought of saying that, I think that's all broken up. That idea has no longer sailed.
India is a member of BRICS, along with Brazil, China, Russia and South Africa. Trump believes that BRICS poses a threat to the US dollar. Members like Russia want BRICS to abandon the dollar. Moscow wants BRICS nations to come up with an alternative currency and trade in local currencies. And Trump has threatened 100% tariffs on BRICS nations if they go ahead with this plan to de-dollarize. And this has unsettled investors because Trump is not just targeting bilateral trade here, he is threatening groups like BRICS. He is willing to punish them to protect American interests or what he believes are American interests. What kind of impact will all of this have on India? If Trump imposes tariffs on Indian imports, almost every large sector could be affected, from chemicals to automobiles, defense, energy companies, textiles, footwear, all of it. They're all vulnerable to Trump's tariffs. Even the Indian rupee is feeling the pressure. Last week, it fell to nearly 88 against the US dollar. India's Reserve Bank had to intervene then. The RBI defended the rupee by selling dollars from its reserves. So the Trump effect is in full force. His unpredictable policies will test the Indian markets and the Indian rupee, but it's not just India that will be hit. Foreign banks are also worried. Banks like JP Morgan and HSBC, they're taking unprecedented measures to manage this Trump-induced volatility. Both banks had stored some of their gold reserves in the UK. They're now moving this reserve. It is being shifted from London to New York on commercial flights. Often banks and investors resort to gold to keep their investments safe because gold is a safe haven in uncertain times. And that explains why gold prices have been soaring in the international market. 1 kilo of gold now costs well over $94,000. There is a spike in demand for the yellow metal. Trump has been in office for just 4 weeks and he's already shaking up the financial markets. He's going to be around for 4 years. So governments and investors must plan for the long term. For our last story tonight, let's talk about those unwanted house guests that you regularly fly into, because they're just about everywhere. They spread germs wherever they go, and they love sitting on your rotting fruits. In case you haven't guessed it yet, I am talking about fruit flies. The pests that annoy you on Earth might be going to space. India's Gaganyaan mission will launch this year. It is all set to send humans into space. Along with them, 20 fruit flies will be taking the flight. I know it sounds bizarre. Why are fruit flies going to space? And has this happened before? Our next report tells you.
Gaganyaan, meaning skycraft in Hindi, is India's first human spaceflight mission. It is the most populous nation's maiden attempt to send humans into space. It aims to launch a habitable space capsule into a 400-kilometer orbit and safely return it with a splashdown in the Indian Ocean. The launch is scheduled for later this year, and if successful, it will propel India into a select group of countries with human spaceflight capabilities, including the US, Russia, and China. But Gaganyaan won't just be sending humans into space. It will also be launching 20 fruit flies up there. Now, this may sound bizarre, but it's really not. Sure, fruit flies are gross. They are like uninvited house guests who are attracted to your rotten fruits. It is creepy and annoying. But before you judge them, know that fruit flies are a lot like you. Or like any human being for that matter. Believe it or not, fruit flies and humans are about 60% genetically identical. Meaning fruit flies resemble humans at a cellular and genetic level. They have 75% similarity for disease-causing genes as well, which means these flies are an essential part of our research. Plus, compared to mice, apes, or dogs, they are much cheaper and easier to work with. So they are usually the first stop in scientific research into a range of human illnesses, including Alzheimer's, obesity, and even cancer. You can find fruit flies in countless research labs the world over, and not just on Earth. In 1947, the humble fruit fly went where no creature had gone before: outer space. That's when Americans sent fruit flies to space, making these tiny creatures the first living beings to go up there. Since then, numerous scientists have studied them to understand the impact of spaceflight on humans, on their development, reproduction, aging, immunity, and heart function. You see, space alters the human body. It impacts the body and the brain. It alters body weight and bone density. It changes heart functioning and gut microbiome. It even increases the risk of kidney stones. And that last bit is exactly what India plans to research. In space, bones reduce in mineral content, urine composition changes, and humans are prone to dehydration. These factors create the perfect storm of kidney stone formation. Now, Indian astronauts want to study this phenomenon on fruit flies to understand why this happens and how it can be prevented. If the Gaganyaan mission is successful, India will not only script history by sending humans into space, but also bring back answers, which will help the entire world's future space missions take flight.
The AI chatbot race is heating up. Today, Elon Musk unveiled a new model. It's called Grok 3. Unlike other models, this one is raw and unfiltered, a bit like Musk himself. But here's a big selling point. Musk claims Grok 3 is the fastest AI model yet, even faster than GPT-4 and DeepSeek. Grok is so fast, it can answer your question before Musk fires half the US government. Something good did come out of it, though. Ahead of the launch, Musk stayed away from X for a while, a much-needed break for our X timelines. Take a look. Now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. A Delta Airlines plane crashes upside down at Canada's Toronto airport. Hundreds of Brazilians head to the beaches of Rio de Janeiro amid a scorching heat wave. And twin panda cubs attract hundreds of visitors in Hong Kong. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1930, Pluto was discovered. It was given the Roman name for the god of the underworld. Initially classified as the 9th planet, Pluto's status was debated for decades. In 2006, it was redefined as a dwarf planet. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.